just get that music to fade out a little. So great. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Good evening. My name is Carol Kozak-Ward. It is a distinct pleasure for me to welcome all of you once again virtually from places on the East Coast, from places on the West Coast, and from other locations. If you can, first of all, take a moment to make sure that your own setting is muted. I can never get it right, but try to stifle yourself, as some of my teachers would have said 50 plus years ago. We're thrilled that you are here joining us for the short title, Jewish Broadway, with our wonderful presenter, Miriam Raisin. Let me take one moment to thank all of our sponsors, big and small, but definitely we'll start with the marquee individuals. They include, or organizations truly, they include SCFD, which is an acronym for the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District here in Denver. Because of SCFD, the Colorado Hebrew Chorale is just one of more than 300 Tier 3 organizations devoted to bringing arts and culture to all. I would also like to thank Colorado Creative Industries. I would also like to thank Union Pacific Foundation, the Center Foundation, the Bain Family Foundation, and of course, all of you for being here tonight. I'm just double checking to make sure I'm not leaving anybody waiting in the waiting room too long. Of course, you're in for a special treat. July 4th was only last Sunday, but we postponed the celebration of the United States of America's 245th anniversary until tonight, with a special session focusing on 1776. If you have any questions for Miriam, you can leave them in the chat and I will make sure to flag her down. Without further ado, take it away, Miriam.
All right. So yes, this is a very different session than what you're probably used to from me. For those of you who do not know, I have passions far beyond Broadway, and one of them happens to be early American history. So instead of charging forward with our trip through musical theater history, we're going back way further. So we're going to be talking about how the American Revolution has been depicted in musical theater, which I'm sure some of you can think of yet another musical that features the American Revolution. We'll get to that later. We'll be also diving into the actual history behind what's happening as well, because I think that is just as important as what's being shown on stage, to know where things have been and what they've been translated into. We'll also be looking at a little bit about what life was like for Jews in the colonies from what I could find. And I hope you're ready to party like it's 1776, so grab your history books and settle in for tonight's session. I think I'm having a bit of a... Give me just a second. I'm having an audio issue. There we go. Sorry about that. We're just having something's not playing for what it's supposed to be doing. Well, if it doesn't play, we'll just skip that part then. There we go.
You ever seen a painting by John Trumbull? Founding fathers in a line looking all humble, patiently waiting to sign a declaration and start a nation. No sign of disagreement, not one grumble. The reality is messier and richer, kids. The reality is not a pretty picture, kids. Every cabinet meeting's like a full-on rumble. What you're about to witness is no John Trumbull.
surely this is all a painting you've probably seen before, painted by...
Let's go make sure everybody's got that. I don't know if I can see a painting, so no visuals there. We got the...
Oh, okay, hang on. I think I accidentally turned off screen share. Okay.
Yay! We're back.
There we go.
Mute yourself.
All right.
Except
So, this painting. Now...
You ever seen a...
Okay, we're stopping that because it's just going to do that again. And I'm going to go back to the black one. All right, so that was a painting you surely have all seen before, painted by John Trumbull, an American artist who painted a number of works depicting moments in early American history. And this, along with, I believe it's 3 others, hang in the Capitol Rotunda. I know I saw it on my 8th grade Washington trip. I'm sure that there's probably quite a few people who have. The song is called No John Trumbull, and it's by Lin-Manuel Miranda and performed by The Roots. It was originally supposed to preface Cabinet Battle 1 in Hamilton, but was cut and wound up in what they called the mixtape instead. In case you didn't know, most parts of American history are far messier than depicted in paintings just like these, which usually happened many, many, many years after the fact. Founding fathers continually trash-talking each other, buying up newspapers to print bad press about your enemies, yellow journalists running wild, spouting off rumors, and quite a bit of drinking. I'm serious, check out George Washington's bar tab from the night from when the Constitution was signed. It's clear that they had quite the party. This might be a surprising bit of information, but the Founding Fathers are just like us. So now we've got our first trivia question. Who did not sign the Declaration of Independence? Sam Adams, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, or George Washington? Okay. Got 7 out of 27, 8, 10. Okay, can we get any more? We got 13. As I say always, nothing bad happens to you if you get it wrong. I promise. I wasn't nearly as kind in this session in regards to my questions as I usually am. I will warn you that way. Okay. So it looks like most of you guessed George Washington, with Benjamin Franklin being a close second. So that is indeed correct. Yes. And this is a picture of the actor Ian Kahn from George Washington in Turn, Washington Spies, which is a TV show on AMC. Alright, so yes, if you guessed Washington, you're correct. He was a little busy dealing with the other side of the revolution. Washington was recently made the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. This all happened despite his less than stellar military history at this point. And just to give you an idea, he may or may not have single-handedly started the French and Indian War at the age of 24. It all came down to the fact that he was from the South, and even better, that he was from Virginia. After all, where Virginia goes, the South follows. Like I said, we're doing things a little bit different here. We got our first song, which is called Mama Look Sharp, which is from 1776 and sung by a Continental Army soldier.
I do die. Hey, hey, Mama.
So the Revolutionary War was far from glitz, glam, and glory. It was hard, particularly on those in the Continental Army. This song was originally cut from the film adaptation of 1776 because of the anti-war sentiment that it presented. A courier in Washington's army, that's who's depicted here, is running back and forth, looking disheveled, tired, and ragged, like pretty much everybody else in the Continental Army. It helps to illustrate the vast disparity between the likes of him and his fellow soldiers compared to those who are well-fed and lavishly dressed seated in Congress, who are continually failing to provide them funds and much-needed supplies. The desperate times and at times disparaging letters that come from General Washington show up in the film at a few different points in times. And fun fact, there's a strong possibility that a lot of those strongly worded letters were written by Alexander Hamilton, who had permission to write under the general's name. So, this is an interesting character I found out about. His name was Chaim Solomon. So Solomon was the prime financier of the American Revolution and the founder of the First Philadelphia Synagogue, Mikveh Israel. He was born in Leszno, Poland, in 1740 to Sephardic Jewish parents. And while he was young, he traveled to Western Europe extensively and returned to Poland in around 1770 and eventually left for England in the wake of the Polish partition. And that was when he made his way to New York City. So Solomon quickly became wound up in the Patriot cause and sympathized with them and joined the New York branch of the Sons of Liberty, a group you've probably heard about, may have had a little bit of a tea party. In 1776, he was arrested as a spy by the British, but then he was pardoned. However, while he was in their capture, he was trying to sweet-talk some of the Hessians into helping him out. And so he's trying to get on convincing them to desert the war effort as well and feeding them false information. Solomon continued to do acts of espionage and collaborated with the likes of Hercules Mulligan and Cato. In 1778, he was captured again and sentenced to death. Once again, Solomon escaped. He settled in Philadelphia and became a broker. He was appointed the paymaster of the French troops in North America and worked extensively alongside Robert Morris. From about 1781 to 1784, Solomon raised approximately $650,000 for George Washington and the war effort. In August of 1781, the Continental Army had Cornwallis cornered in Yorktown. However, they were out of funds. When Morris informed Washington of this, he reportedly said, "Send for Chaim Solomon." Solomon then proceeded to raise the desperately needed $20,000 that helped with a successful campaign in Yorktown, which ended up proving to be the final battle of the Revolution. Chaim Solomon was extensively involved in the Jewish community in Philadelphia up until his untimely death in 1785. So you can take a moment to think that perhaps, where would we be without the help of Chaim Solomon? Would we have been able to win the Battle of Yorktown, or the Revolution at all? Now we're going to watch a dramatization of the battle that ended the Revolution.
So the American experiment begins with my friends all scattered to the winds. Lawrence is in South Carolina, we've defining bravery. We'll never be free until we end slavery. When we finally drive the British away, Lafayette is there waiting in Chesapeake Bay. How did we know that this plan would work? We had a spy on the inside, that's right.
Tell a spying on the British government. I take the measurements information and then I smuggle it to my brother's revolutionary covenant. I run with the sons of liberty and I am love. See, that's what happens when you up against the ruffians. We in the somebody's gotta shovel it. Hercules Mulligan, I need no introduction. When you knock me down, I get the back up again.
writing, a young man in a red coat stands on the parapet.
We lower our guns as he frantically waves their white handkerchief.
And just like that, it's over. We tend to our wounded, we count our dead.
Black and white soldiers wonder alike if this really means freedom. Not yet. We negotiate the terms of surrender. I see George Washington smile. We escort the men out of Yorktown. They stagger home single file. Tens of thousands of people flood the streets. There are screams and church bells ringing. And as our fallen foes retreat, I hear the drinking song they're singing.
On a musical note, they do mention drinking song, The World Turned Upside Down. It is a real drinking song. It does not sound like that. Alright. So now you know that spies are far beyond what is depicted from James Bond films, and throughout history they came in all shapes and sizes, from Hercules Mulligan to Chaim Solomon, to even the Culper spy ring, which you may or may not have heard of. There was quite a bit of espionage happening during the Revolutionary War, so who was the American spy master who made it all happen? We've got Major Benjamin Talmadge, Hercules Mulligan, the Marquis de Lafayette, Marquis Gilbert du Motier de Lafayette, or John Andre. Okay, we got 6 out of 30. 7. I think this is probably my most difficult question tonight. If that makes you feel any better. Okay, 13, 14, 15, halfway. 16. Getting quite the nice spread. Anybody else? We got like a half of you who have not taken part yet. Okay, I think that seems to be the end. Okay, I'm genuinely surprised. Okay, so yes, Major Benjamin Talmadge was indeed the American spy master. Hercules Mulligan was a spy. Lafayette, I'm not as sure about, but John Andre was the British spy master. Said if you want to learn more about that, a really great show is Turn. And I'm gonna try and get rid of. Oh, nope. Oh, whatever. So yes, Major Benjamin Talmadge. So this is probably a little bit more what you were expecting at this point. So we're talking about Peter Stone. Peter Stone is not the composer, however, he did the writing for 1776 and did compose on a few other occasions. He was quite the well-rounded guy. Stone was born to Jewish parents Hilda and John Stone in Los Angeles. And when he was 15, he saw Mexican Hayride by Cole Porter, which inspired him to pursue theater. He had his first foray into theatrical writing in 1958 with his play Friend of the Family. It was in 1960 that he worked on a musical adaptation of the Alexandre Dumas play Keane, based on the life of famed 19th century actor Edward Keane. It was considered a bit of a flop. Stone continued to struggle, occasionally finding success in the film industry with Charade and Father Goose. Stone truly found success with his work on 1776. Following the success of 1776, he worked on A Flowering Peach, which told the story of Noah's Ark. He then adapted Some Like It Hot, sure a film that many of you know, into a musical called Sugar, which was directed by Broadway legend Gower Champion. Stone continued to write for theater and television and film for many, many years, and also used a number of pseudonyms for his work, such as Pierre Martin and Peter Joshua. He even served as the president of the Dramatists Guild for a while. His other works include My One and Only, Titanic, and Curtains, which was actually done posthumously, so long after he died. He passed away in 2003 in Manhattan and was posthumously inducted into the American Theater Hall of Fame. And what you all are here for tonight, 1776. Music and lyrics by Sherman Edwards, a book by Peter Stone, cast including William Daniels, Howard Da Silva, Paul Hecht, Clifford David, Ken Howard, Virginia Vestoff, Ronald Holgate, and Betty Buckley. Its original run at the 46th Street Theater was 1,217 performances. Yeah. This piece involved a number of years of research on the part of Stone and Edwards, and the attention to detail really shows. They use quotes from the founders themselves, from their papers and their letters and their writings, and it gives an air of authenticity to their language as they speak, with just enough of a modern edge that the modern audience can understand what they're saying or get the points that they're trying to make. The story of 1776 is centered around the development and signing of the document we now know as the Declaration of Independence, which, if any of you are eagle-eyed and watching my screen, you can see I have a copy right behind me. Oh, and of course, lots and lots and lots of flies, which you will actually be surprised to know has historical context. We'll get to that later. The show features a number of important and well-known figures in early American history, such as John Adams, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and many more. Alright, I told you I would let up at some point on the hard trivia. What other show takes place during the 4th of July? 110 in the Shade, Porgy and Bess, In the Heights, or Carousel? Okay. Got 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 10. Okay, 15. Can we do better than 15? Okay. Better than 16? Okay. So we got a little bit more than half. Okay, 60%. And anybody else want to take a crack? Okay. So it seems the general consensus here is that the other show that takes place during the 4th of July is Carousel. Not quite. Oh, well, it seems my video went away. It was supposed to be the opening where they tell you that, but the answer is indeed In the Heights, a musical written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, set in the neighborhood of Washington Heights, named after George Washington. It's also got the George Washington Bridge. When a blackout hits the city, Sonny and Graffiti Pete take some fireworks and set them off in an attempt to light up the night sky and help everybody find their way home. And yes, double trivia. This is a little bit different. It's a select all that apply. What 3 things did Thomas Jefferson want to be remembered for? Introducing macaroni and cheese to the United States, being president, author of the Declaration of Independence, being the father of the University of Virginia, being the only architect president, authoring the Statute of Religious Freedom in Virginia, being a virtuoso violinist, or improving the swivel chair.
And full disclosure, this is the one poll that I missed, so if you would like to, put your letters in the chat and we'll see how much we get.
See if I can pull it. Okay. Chat's fighting with me, so someone's gonna have to tell me what's going on.
Okay, so we've got 1 vote for C, D, and F. C, D, F.
Okay.
Everything but A. Okay.
And remember, check the wording. What 3 things did Thomas Jefferson want to be remembered for? Not necessarily that you remember him for.
Got a pretty strong pull for C, D, F so far.
Okay. Anything else?
Ooh, got one for B, C, and D.
Okay.
Get your guesses in the next 15 seconds. Ooh, got a B, C, D.
All right.
A, F, G. Ooh, there's a combination.
We're switching it up now. Okay. Any other guesses?
C, G, H, B, D, F.
We're really covering the whole map here.
All right, and 5, 4, 3.
Okay. He wanted to make sure you knew this, so it's on his tomb. He wanted to let you know that he was the author of the Declaration of American Independence and of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom and the father of the University of Virginia. However, let it be known that everything that was listed there is something that he did do. He did play the violin, which I'm sure is a song that might be ringing in people's heads now that I said that. He did also introduce mac and cheese to the United States and served it at many dinner parties. And while he didn't invent the swivel chair, he improved it. So you can thank him for that as well, for all the fun that a swivel chair has provided you as well. So why am I talking about Thomas Jefferson? Because he's an interesting guy. He's a problematic fave if there ever was one. So I'm not here to give you the biography of the man. There are others out there who can do a far better job than me. However, he's the only character who is depicted in both shows being presented here tonight. In general, the Founding Fathers can be deified in our media. I'm sure you've seen this. Held up high at unattainable pedestals and seen as paragons. The reality is usually very different. Sometimes we need to be reminded that these men are human just like us. They had their hobbies, their interests, their quirks, and personalities. Sometimes this makes it into dramatizations and adaptations, and sometimes this does not. So back to Jefferson. Let's talk about just the man himself, ignoring all depictions you know of him. As noted by the Duc de la Rochefoucauld-Liancourt, I don't speak French, I probably butchered that, Mr. Jefferson displays a mild and easy and obliging temper, though he's somewhat cold and reserved. His conversation is the most agreeable kind. This is a stark contrast to one of his rivals, Hamilton. From that alone, it can be seen why the two failed to see eye to eye. Jefferson was verbose, but as opposed to outwardly speaking, he preferred to convey his ideas through writing and text. He was a prominent supporter of religious freedom and was intrigued by many religions and even compiled what is now known as the Jefferson Bible, which features his own edits and additions of passages from the Torah and the Quran. You can actually find this yourself, it's still in publication. Jefferson struggled with publicly speaking, and he had a hard time with criticism as well. He did well with small groups, but delivered notoriously unmoving speeches before large crowds. His depiction in the film of 1776, Jefferson is portrayed by Ken Howard, who embodies the stoic and quiet nature that Jefferson was known for. He's seen sitting off to the side from the rest of Congress, quietly reading a book, and generally stays that way. Even in Martha Jefferson's song, he plays the violin, she notes, he never speaks his passions, he never speaks his views, whereas other men speak volumes, the man I love is mute. If you've ever seen or listened to Hamilton, we don't see many of those traits embodied. Though it is very true that Jefferson enjoyed his time in France, and he was quite the Francophile, and did dress well. Shout out to costume designer Paul Tazwell for the impeccable purple coat. This quiet and thoughtful man seems to be nowhere in sight. It should also be noted that this was two very different points in Jefferson's life, with 13 years in between these points. Originally portrayed by David Diggs, who, if you did not know this, actually is Jewish. Lin-Manuel Miranda said he wanted to give Jefferson a distinct sound that differentiated him from Hamilton. The rapping and fast-paced lyrics would represent Hamilton and his ability to know when to keep his mouth shut. Whereas Jefferson, and what he had to say about his first song, What Did I Miss? This is from what's called the Hamilton. So this is Lin-Manuel Miranda's notes. He's a full generation older than Hamilton, and he was absent for much of the fighting of the Revolutionary War, though certainly an architect of some of the founding documents. So I wrote him in a sort of Lambert, Hendricks, Ross, Gil Scott-Heron mode, jazzy, proto-hip-hop, but not the boom-bap of Hamilton. So here's the two depictions, first from Hamilton.
France is following us to revolution. There is no more status quo. But the sun comes up and the world still spins. I helped Lafayette draft a declaration. Then I said I gotta go. Gotta be in Monticello. Now the work at home begins. So what did I miss? What did I miss? Virginia, my home sweet home, I wanna give you a kiss.
And then here he is in 1776.
Mr. Adams, leave me alone!
Mr. Jefferson.
Mr. Adams, I beg of you. I've not seen my wife these past 6 months.
And we solemnly declare that we will preserve our liberties, being with one mind resolved to die free men rather than to live slaves. Thomas Jefferson, on the necessity of taking up arms, 1775, magnificent. Why, you write 10 times better than any man in Congress, including me. For a man of only 30...
That was my notes. All right. So this is another song that was left on the cutting room floor as a result of what we'll later be discussing, called the Nixon Cool Cut. This is Molasses to Rum, and this is a song about the Triangle slave trade. And Edward Rutledge is making the point that the Northerners cannot and should not hold themselves higher than the Southerners in regards to the matter of slaves. That they themselves are complicit to the problem as well. They may not keep slaves in the numbers of the southern plantations, but who are the sailors on the slave ships that are going to and from Africa? Embarking from New England, going off to Africa, and then to the Caribbean with slaves in tow, supplying the economy there.
Molasses to rum, to slaves, 'tisn't models, 'tis money that saves. Shall we dance to the sound of the profitable pound in molasses and rum and slaves? Who sail the ships out of Guinea, laden with idols and slaves? 'Tis Boston can boast to the West Indies coast. Jamaica, we brown-watch it. Antigua, Barbados, we from Bibles and slaves. Gentlemen, you mustn't think that our northern friends see our black slaves as merely figures in a ledger. Oh, no. They see them as figures on a block. Look at the faces at the auctions, gentlemen. White faces on African wharves. Seafaring faces, New England faces. Put them in the ships, cram them in the ships, stop them in the ships. Hurry, gentlemen, let the auction begin.
American aristocracy. I promise, there's a reason I'm talking about this. We may not have a royal family, dukedoms and lords, but that doesn't mean that America doesn't have its own royalty in some way, and hasn't, for many, many years. They come about their own ways over the many years, some even moving up high enough in world society to actually be married to royals. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about first families. Those first settlers in the colonies who were mostly English and Dutch, as there were many of these from the earlier settlers came from. Virginia and New York have societies that presently track these families, who once and sometimes still do hold a lot of sway in politics. Some of these families include Washingtons, Jeffersons, the Lees, the Schuylers, the Van Rensselaers, the Livingstons, and the Morrises. Why am I talking about this? Because I needed a reason to show you my favorite song from 1776, and this is kind of the only way I could think of how. And I will tell you that there's somebody here tonight who this is her least favorite, and this is like her worst nightmare. It's the last song before a half-an-hour break until the next song in the show. And I like it only because of how well Ronald Holgate, who plays Richard Henry Lee, just portrays himself. It's just very enjoyable and a lot of fun to watch. So, I really don't know much about the actual Richard Henry Lee, unfortunately. He's not somebody who I've researched extensively. So I really can't say whether or not this is remotely accurate as to how he should be depicted. But I like that there's the play on the words Lee constantly throughout this whole thing, and you can just tell that John Adams is very done with all of this nonsense and just wants to get down to business. So Lee is off home to Virginia to get their government to sign off on him putting forth the motion that they should vote on independence. Remember, where Virginia goes, the South follows, and everyone will follow after that. That and John Adams is obnoxious and disliked. Hamilton fans and history buffs should be noted, Richard Henry Lee is not related to General Charles Lee of the Battle of Monmouth infamy, however, is related to Robert E. Lee.
My name is Richard Henry Lee, Virginia is my home. My name is Richard Henry Lee, Virginia is my home. And may my horses turn to glue if I can't deliver up to you the resolution on independence. For I am FFB, the first family in the sovereign colony of Virginia. Yes, the FFB. The oldest family in the oldest colony in America. And may the British burn my land if I can't deliver to your hand a resolution on independence. You see, it's eerily, narrowly, and everywhere really.
Socially, political, financial, natural, internal, external, fraternal, eternal,
the FFB. The first family in the sovereign colony of Virginia. And may my wife refuse my bed if I can't deliver, as I said, a resolution on independence.
Spoken modestly. God help him. Oh, he will, John, he will.
They say that God in heaven is everybody's God.
Amen.
I'll admit that God in heaven is everybody's God. But I tell you, John, with pride, God leans a little on the side of the Lees of old Virginia. You see, it's eerily, verily, and everywhere a Lee, eerily, verily, and everywhere a Lee. Look out, there's half a Lee. Bobby Lee, General Lad Horse, Harry Lee, Willie Lee, Jesse Lee,
and Richard H. Smith.
And may my blood stop running if I can't deliver up to you a resolution on independence. Yes, oh my God, it's tyranny, tyranny. Come on, boys, join in with me. Tyranny, tyranny.
When do you leave?
Immediately. Tyranny, tyranny.
When will you return?
Shortly. Tyranny, tyranny. And I'll come back triumphantly. Tyranny, tyranny. Everywhere a Lee, forward.
That was the most revolting display I have ever witnessed.
So I've made reference to this a few times at this point. So, a few songs were cut from the film production of 1776. This is what is known as the Nixon Cool Cut. When 1776 first premiered on Broadway, the nation was severely divided, but somehow this seemed to sort of draw people together, and they shared an appreciation for the show, including Nixon, who requested that the cast perform at the White House. They were hesitant to go, but the staff was very excited. They were going to have the Marine Band, which is a creation of Thomas Jefferson's. They were going to have them learn all the music, and everybody seemed excited, except for the cast. It was hotly debated whether or not they actually should accept the invitation to go, and it turns out they had reasons to be worried, as the show's director was approached by staffers asking if they could maybe make some cuts to the songs. Namely, Mama Looks Sharp and Cool, Cool, Considerate Men. The producers refused, citing it was censorship and that they wouldn't do it. The staffers dropped the request, and the show went on. Things were different when it came to the film, as one of the producers, Jack Warner, was a prominent supporter of Nixon. It's slightly shrouded in mystery exactly what happened that led to these events and how they exactly came to be. But it is possible that Jack Warner, literally with his own hands and a pair of scissors, went and cut these scenes out himself and ordered them to be shredded without the agreement of the director, Peter Hunt. When Peter Hunt did ask Warner how we could do this, he said, with a pair of scissors. But a copy of the negatives survived, clearly. We've been watching some of it tonight. And it was thanks to a film editor, and it was hidden away in a salt mine in Kansas. It has since been restored in the re-release of 2002. So if you've not seen that re-release, you've probably never seen these songs before in the film. And as someone who has seen both versions and not knowing that they existed, I will say that the director's cut is much better. William Daniels, actually, who plays John Adams, spoke about this, that it gives more balance to the show when these songs are there, and it takes away some of that deifying that happens. But it's really hard to say whether or not this would have saved the film, which was a critical and box office flop when it first came out as well. Now the last song from the quote Cool Cut, Cool, Considerate Men.
What we do rationally. We never ever go off half-cocked, not we. Why begin till we know that we can win? And if we cannot win, why bother to begin?
You say this game's not of our choosing. Why should we risk losing?
We cool man.
Mr. Hancock, you're a man of property, one of us. Why don't you join us in our minuet? Why do you persist in dancing with John Adams? Good Lord, sir, you don't even like him.
That is true. He annoys me quite a lot. But still, I'd rather trot to Mr. Adams' new gabot.
Why? For personal glory? For a place in history? Be careful, sir. History will brand him and his followers as traitors.
Traitors, Mr. Dickinson?
To what?
The British crown? Or the British half-crown? Fortunately, there are not enough men of property in America to dictate policy.
Perhaps not. But don't forget that most men with nothing would rather protect the possibility of becoming rich than face the reality of being poor. And that is why they will follow us
To the right, ever to the right, ever to the left, forever to the right. Where there's gold, a market that will hold, tradition that is old, reluctant to be bold.
I sing Hosanna, Hosanna, in a sane and lucid manner. We are cool.
So this song is sung by John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, who is related to the writer Emily Dickinson. And he's being accompanied by the rest of his loyalist compatriots in the Continental Congress. It consists of a minuet, and some of the sounds evoke feelings of the Star-Spangled Banner. I'm sure you may have heard a little bit of that. They are rejoicing the fact that John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and a couple of other radical thinkers have gone off to see the encampment of where Washington's troops Washington and his troops are in New Brunswick, which is why they have their lyric, "I sing Hosanna, Hosanna." They're rejoicing the fact that their essentially party pooper is gone. A term you've probably heard if you do enough singing. This, in particular, was a song that Nixon did not like. And I'm sure it's pretty clear as to why. It has some pretty anti-conservative messages and some mockery being made about the representatives. Particularly, never to the left, forever to the right. So Howard Da Silva, this is the actor who played Benjamin Franklin. And he was Jewish. So Da Silva was born Howard Silverblatt in Cleveland, Ohio, the son of Benjamin and Bertha Silverblatt. His father was a dress cutter, and his mother was a female rights activist. And he would be considered a character actor. The family first moved to the Bronx and then to Pittsburgh. And while he was in Pittsburgh, he was financing his education at the Carnegie Institute of Technology by working in steel mills. Da Silva had his stage debut in the Civic Repertory Theater, and that was also when he picked up the name Da Silva as opposed to Silverblatt. He had his Hollywood debut in a movie called Once in a Blue Moon. He continued to work and get more roles, and even actually did some work with Orson Welles in his Mercury Theater premiered, I believe, yes, he was in Mark Blitzstein's rather infamous The Cradleable Rock, which has a very interesting history. Da Silva, so this is another reason he's being mentioned, was actually blacklisted in 1951 and was noted as being an unfriendly witness by the House of Un-American Activities panel. A fact I'm sure that Benjamin Franklin himself would be rather proud of. Da Silva played a number of notable characters, including Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Louis B. Mayer in Mommy Dearest, and he also lent his voice to the CBS Radio Mystery Theater and did a few narrations on some episodes of Doctor Who. Da Silva died of lymphoma at the age of 76. So if that name sounds familiar, or he looks familiar, what other role is Howard Da Silva known for playing? Judd Fry, Billy Bigelow, Curly McLean, or Professor Harold Hill? Okay, we've got two. Surely we can get more than two. More than 4? 6? Okay, getting somewhere. Got 7 out of 27. Okay, 9. We've already gotten to 16 before. Can't we get there again? 13. Getting closer. And
10 seconds.
Got 10 seconds to put in your answer, or however much time we got left now. Just probably not much. Okay. All right. So most of you guessed Judd Fry. And you would be correct. So yes, he did originate the role of Judd Fry in Oklahoma. In August of 1790, then President George Washington sent a letter to a synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island. The synagogue still exists, although today is under the name Toro Synagogue. And in this letter to Washington, he uses a quote that he favors quite a bit. This is the quote in generals. "May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in the safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid." He uses this quote a lot. It's been noted, I believe it was Mount Vernon who noted this, that he used it over 50 times in various correspondences over the years, at least ones that we have. And this quote actually comes from the book of Micah. He uses it to different effects, different times in his letters, but in general, he's talking about that, you know, everybody gets to live in peace and harmony. You may have heard this quote before, whether it be from Micah, whether it be from reading Washington's letters, and maybe somewhere else as well. And you can actually find the full copy of this letter, if you want to read it for yourself, either on the Founders Archive, which is a free resource if you ever want to read the letters of the founders themselves. They're separated out by each person. It's a great resource. Or it's actually printed, and that's how I originally found it, in a Siddur Sim Shalom in the back. So who wrote George Washington's presidential farewell address? Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, John Jay, or James Madison? Okay, we got 2. We got 3. 5. 7. 8. Okay, with 33%. 12. We're climbing up there. People seem a lot more certain about this question. I will admit I probably did give a hint to this before. So
10 seconds.
18. This has gotten the most responses so far. There's actually a bit of a tie. Come on, someone, just guess anything and break the tie. Yeah? Well, we have a tie between Alexander Hamilton and George Washington. And indeed, it was Alexander Hamilton. Once again, he was filling in the role of writing for His Excellency and wrote the farewell address for the outgoing president. This is depicted in the musical Hamilton and the song One Last Time, which includes dialogue from Washington's actual farewell address, and even uses Washington's favorite quote.
Though in reviewing the incidents of my administration, I am unconscious of intentional error, I'm nevertheless too sensible of my defects not to think it probable that I may have committed many errors. I shall also carry with me the hope that my country will view them with indulgence, and that after 45 years of my life dedicated to its service with an upright zeal, faults of incompatibility will be consigned to oblivion, as I myself must soon be to the mansions of rest. I anticipate with pleasing expectation that retreat, in which I promise myself to realize the sweet enjoyment of partaking in the midst of my fellow citizens, the benign influence of good laws under a free government, the ever-favorite object of my heart, and the happy reward, as I trust, of our mutual cares, labors, and dangers. One last time, teach them how to say goodbye. George Washington's going home.
In case you don't happen to recognize that performer, there was Lin-Manuel Miranda and Christopher Jackson at the Kennedy Center Honors.
Though.
So I keep talking about him. Yes, he's not Jewish. However, the man did a surprise performance of L'chaim at his wedding and has an honorary degree from Yeshiva University, so close enough. Besides, it's really hard to make some of the points that I've been trying to make without talking about Hamilton. So, give me a little leeway here. And we're going to talk about a little bit about the creator of Hamilton and In the Heights, Lin-Manuel Miranda. So, Lin-Manuel Miranda was born on January 16, 1980, to clinical psychologist Luis Tans Miranda and Democratic Party consultant Luis Miranda Jr. in New York City. He grew up in the Inwood neighborhood, and while he was growing up, he would spend at least 1 month a year visiting his grandparents in Vega Alta, Puerto Rico. Miranda attended Hunter College Elementary and High School, and it was around this time he started to get a little bit more involved with theater, besides just listening to the vinyl that his father had at home. He ended up playing roles such as Conrad Birdie in Bye Bye Birdie and Jesus in Jesus Christ Superstar while he was in school. He went on to attend Wesleyan University in Connecticut, and it was in his sophomore year that he began working on developing the show we now know as In the Heights, complete with an audition flyer in pink Comic Sans that I can never forgive. Miranda also did work with Wesleyan Student Theater Company's Second Stage, where they premiered the earliest rendition of In the Heights. Miranda graduated from Wesleyan in 2002, which is around the time he met fellow alumni Thomas Kail, and the two began working on revising In the Heights. This was the start of a long-term friendship, professional relationship between the two men that has continued to this day, as Thomas Kail has also directed Hamilton as well, among others. It was in 2004 that they were joined by Chiara Alegria Juarez, who contributed to the book of In the Heights. And that revision premiered out of town in Connecticut in 2005 and off-Broadway in 2007. It premiered on Broadway in March of 2008 and was nominated for 13 Tony Awards and won 4, including Best Musical and Best Original Score, and also won Miranda a Grammy for Best Musical Theater Album. In the midst of the run of In the Heights, Miranda continued to work on new projects and was also acting as a substitute teacher. This included doing Spanish translations for a number of songs in West Side Story, as was mentioned in a previous session. He also contributed music to Bring It On the Musical, which, if you don't know, Bring It On is a movie about competitive cheerleading. He also began to work on Sesame Street, some songs for them, and what was being called at the time the Hamilton mixtape, which led to his next success, Hamilton, jumping at the Public Theater in 2015. But we'll be talking about that a little bit more shortly. He's gone far beyond the realm of Broadway, and I'm sure you know this. And he does more than just write. He also performs, having played both the roles of Usnavi and Alexander Hamilton. We'll be seeing a lot more from him as he directs a film version of Tick, Tick, Boom, which I believe is premiering on Netflix in September, that's starring Andrew Garfield. He also wrote songs in Moana and appeared in Mary Poppins Returns as Jack the Lamplighter. And most recently, he appeared as the Piragüero in the film production of In the Heights. If any of you saw that, there's still a couple days left to watch it on HBO Max. So, yeah, you've probably all heard of a little show called Hamilton. It's really not that impressive, just, one of the biggest musicals of the 2010s and had absolutely zero impact on Broadway at all. Just kidding. Hamilton took the Broadway world by storm, and honestly, it still is. It was nominated for a record-breaking 16 Tony nominations and took home 11. So, didn't quite beat the producers, but it got close. It's been playing at the Richard Rodgers Theater since 2015 and will actually be opening in September of this year. It's had several permanent productions, including in San Francisco and Chicago, a run on the West End, and a pro shot on Disney+, and still is drawing crowds into the fold. I think their most recent production opened in Australia. The original cast included Lin-Manuel Miranda, Philip Hsu, Leslie Odom Jr., Renee Elise Goldsberry, Christopher Jackson, David Diggs, Okirit Onadawan, Anthony Ramos, Jasmine Cephas-Jones, and Jonathan Groff. Couldn't list the New York run because it's still going. It was originally conceived of as a mixtape. It was not really going to be a staged show. And people laughed when he performed at what was actually the opening number at the White House for the Obamas. You can find video of people laughing and not quite understanding this concept of the Founding Fathers plus hip-hop equals amazing show. He was inspired by Ron Chernow's biography, mine is somewhere behind me, which he actually read on vacation. Not too different from how Stephen Schwartz discovered Wicked by Gregory Maguire. He discovered that what he decided was that no one else embodied hip-hop more. It's the story of Alexander Hamilton and his life in the Caribbean to his arrival to New York City and like the many tragedies and hardships that he faced. All the way goes to his death in 1804 at the hands of Vice President Aaron Burr, which the duel took place 216 years ago today. It would be considered a sung-through musical with next to no dialogue, minus the heartbreaking Lawrence interlude, which is not on the soundtrack. Miranda cleverly uses styles of music, lyrics, and more to give each character their own personal style and story. Lafayette first speaks and raps very slowly when we first meet him, but the pace increases all the way until his prominent song Guns and Ships as a reference to how quickly the Marquis de Lafayette picked up learning English and was able to converse with his fellow American troops. It was also a conscious decision that Eliza, that's Hamilton's wife, she never raps throughout the show, minus a little beatboxing during the song Take a Break. It was a way of separating her out from everyone else. All of this to say, it's truly worth the hype and the praise. The ending also leaves you wondering, who's the title referring to? Is it Hamilton himself? Or is it Eliza, the woman who made sure that his story got told? Because believe me, people tried to fight that hard. Music sampling. Here's our bit of music for the night. If you aren't familiar with hip-hop, its history, and its influences, you might not be familiar with the concept called sampling. So sampling is a reuse of a portion of sound recording from another recording. It is the foundation of hip-hop and emerged in the 1980s with producers sampling funk and soul records. And this still happens rather frequently today. Well, actually pretty much all the time today. Lin-Manuel Miranda, in his way of infusing hip-hop and rap into the Broadway scene, does this himself. He's an avid theater nerd, like myself, and it's pretty clear to pick out which things are references to musical theater. There's a lot more that's the rap stuff as well. I'm not as good at that, so I'm not going to dive into that. You can read his books where he talks about this in further depth. So, the first one we have here is from In the Heights. So in the song of the same name, this is the opening number, Usnavi, who's the owner of a bodega, says in response to, I've never been north of 96th Street. So his response, we'll see here.
I've never been north of 96th Street.
Well, you must take the A train. Even farther than Harlem to northern Manhattan and maintain. Get off at 181st and take the escalator. I hope you're writing this down. I'm gonna test you later.
In the same song, he actually has a response of, it's too dang hot, like my man Cole Porter says. The next one's a little bit more difficult. And if you don't know the other show, it's a lot harder to figure out. So if you know Jason Robert Brown and his music, that will help you. This is from Say No to This from Hamilton.
Nobody needs to know.
It sounds like a whole lot of nothing, but in reality, it is reference to a song from a show called The Last 5 Years, which will be discussed in the next session. And it actually does involve someone being unfaithful to their wife. So not only was he taking the melody, he also was taking some of the context and reusing it as well. The last one is from the Hamilton mixtape. This got cut. Part of this does remain in the show, but this is the full version that was produced for the Hamilton mixtape, because there were, and there still are, references to 1776 in Hamilton. And this is particularly clear in a song called The Adams Administration.
An open letter to the fat, arrogant, anti-charismatic, national embarrassment known as President John Adams. The man's irrational. He claims that I'm in league with Britain in some vast international intrigue. Trick, please. You wouldn't know what I'm doing. You're always going berserk, but you never show up to work. Give my regards to Abigail next time you write about my lack of moral compass. At least I do my job up in this rumpus. The line is behind me, across it again. Well, the president lost it again. Oh, such a rough life. Better run to your wife, you're the boss is in Boston again. Let me ask you a question. Who sits at your desk when you're in Massachusetts? Never called you would back at 76. Had you really ever done anything new since? You nuisance with no sense. You would die of irrelevance. Go ahead, you aspire to my level. You aspire to malevolence. Say hi to the Jeffersons and the spies all around me. Maybe they can confirm. I don't care if I kill my career with this letter. I'm combining you to one term. Sit down, John, you fat.
If you didn't catch what was being said, well, part of it got bleeped, but one of them is they were calling you a dick back in 76, and the last one is Sit Down, John, which is a song from 1776. Alright, so after all of this, what's true? What is actually true from these musicals? If 1776 and Hamilton were 100% accurate all of the time, they would not be very exciting to watch. Things need to be shifted and changed for dramatic effect and using their stories to their fullest potential. Both Peter Stone and Lin-Manuel Miranda put years of research into these musicals, and it shows. Sometimes in surprising ways. I already mentioned the dialogue in 1776, and also that they used the letters, particularly between John and Abigail. Remember the ladies, after all. There was also frequent references to flies throughout. But why? And they are continuously opening and closing the windows. Why are we talking about flies? Because it's true. It actually happened. The fact is, on the second day of July, 1776, Richard Henry Lee's motion for a Declaration of Independence was brought back for a vote. John Adams wrote to Abigail, the second day of July, 1776 will be the most memorable day in the history of America. I am apt to believe it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary celebration. Clearly we know he was wrong. Except last time I checked, we celebrate the 4th of July. So what happened on the 4th? They just wanted to approve the wording of the Declaration that Jefferson had written. Independence Hall was quickly growing hotter and hotter as the sun rose. I'm sure this is a feeling we are all very familiar with in these past few days. And, it seemed that the reasonable option is to open the windows. However, when they did this, they were overwhelmed by horseflies, which cut short the nitpicking of Jefferson's writing, and the Declaration itself wasn't signed until August 2nd, 1776. But that's not a very good story. Hamilton does a similar thing. Yes, the election of 1800 was very important, and it did come down between Burr and Jefferson. However, that is not the election that resulted in the duel between Hamilton and Burr. It was in 1804 that Aaron Burr was running for the governor of New York. But a presidential election is far more exciting, or at least that's what they thought. And while Hamilton himself assures you that it's true that Martha Washington named her feral tomcat after him, she did not. That story didn't even come along until long after their deaths by the British around, I believe, the War of 1812. The Washingtons did have pets, but a cat named Alexander Hamilton was not one of them.
Yep.
So next session, we'll be continuing going forward with my timeline of Jewish composers on Broadway into the early 2000s. So this is just a few. This is Marc Shaiman and Jason Robert Brown, so the creators of Hairspray, Smash, Catch Me If You Can, Last 5 Years, and Bridges of Madison County. Looking forward to seeing you all then. Did I miss any questions?
As usual, Miriam, you held them spellbound, and no questions came through, and that's a wonderful sign. And many people who joined late or left early, but they were all, as usual, captivated by your warmth and your wit, not to mention your encyclopedic knowledge of all of this great stuff. I, for one, didn't know about sampling. I certainly didn't know that, true intelligent types always borrow from themselves. And if they can't get it from themselves, they'll go find it somewhere else. Imitation is the highest form of flattery. Thank you for offering us this wonderful and original presentation. And everyone, mark your calendars for Sunday, August the 1st, when Miriam continues with Jewish Broadway. We're grateful, as always, and many of you, you already know my pitch, but any kind of contribution, large or small, we know the decimal point is in there somewhere, but we really do rely on your support in order to keep these online programs going, and we hope we will be able to continue having them. For more information, visit the ColoradoHebrewChorale.org website and find the donate button, and everything will be great from that point forward. Thanks again, everyone, and thanks to my woman behind the screen, Mara, running all the technical stuff tonight for the Colorado Hebrew Chorale. Have a great evening, everybody. Stay cool. Toodaloo.